in this lesson, we'll talk about one of the primary concerns we have to think about when talking about our topology, and that is how does it serve the shape of our model. So if we take a look at these two guns, you can see we have some geometry here, and we have a couple of these long barrels. And one of the things that trips some students up when they start working with geometry and topology, and especially when working with things that are going to be integrated into like a game, is that sort of balance between how much geometry do I need versus how do I get the shape. So our primary goal as a modeler is to reproduce the artwork or create the asset for whatever it is that we're working on. If we're working on a movie, we've got to make that character or that environment. If we're working on a game, same thing. But we're working with different constraints. So whereas in a film environment, you may be able to use as many polygons as you want, in a game, you have usually a budget that you need to work under. Okay, so for instance, if we take a look at this gun, we can see that both of these guns capture the shape that we want for the gun. So from back here, you can see we get a nice long straight barrel. Looking at it from this side, you can see it's pretty smooth. You can see it's a circle shape in there. Same thing, for instance, on these tires. If we look at those, you can see we get the idea. Those are smooth tires. But if we move in here, you can see, for instance, on these tires that these are really faceted once you get really close to them. Same thing here. This barrel looks fine from this angle. But if we were to have a shot where we come up here, then we can obviously see that this is faceted. Now this may be something where this is we're able to compromise here and say this is okay. But if it's, for instance, for a movie, you're obviously not going to have that sort of faceting. You're going to use the extra polygons to create a higher res piece. But there are areas where we can definitely skimp on polygons. So for instance, if we take a look at both of these barrels, something that a lot of students will do is to add extra geometry along the barrel, let's say, or along any long expanse where it doesn't actually change the silhouette or the shape of the model. So in this case, we have a long barrel, and it's going straight from this point all the way back here, and then we have all of these divisions in here breaking up this model. Now, this may be great for sculpting where we want to have even polygons to be able to subdivide, but it's really wasting a lot of polygons if this is sort of a game asset. Okay, we can get the exact same shape by creating something like this. So if you compare the two, you can see we've gotten the exact same shape. This is a straight line from here to here, so we don't need all of those divisions. Now, if we're going to deform this, if it's going to be, melting, or if it's going to be bending somehow, that's when we need to go in and make sure that we have enough divisions to be able to do that. But for something that's static, that's not going to be deforming, that we're just creating the silhouette or the shape of it, we don't need all of that extra geometry. Okay, so you need to decide how much topology, how much geometry do I need to add into the model to get the right silhouette and the right shape. If it's not changing the silhouette, if it's not changing the shape, maybe I don't need that geometry in there. Okay, there's all these things we have to balance together. Creating the actual shape versus if it's going to be deforming in animation, and serving all of these different needs. So those are things that you have to keep in your mind at all times. If you have something like this tire where we have a certain number of polygons here, and I'll just go up to display, go to heads up, and look at the poly count here. Okay, so we're looking at 80 faces, 160 triangles, and so this may be something where, back here, this works great. Then all of a sudden we find out, well, actually this gun's going to be full screen. We don't want to see all of that faceting. Here's the point where we can start smoothing and adding polygons to it. Now the silhouette looks really smooth, but it's cost us a few polygons. So again, it all depends on the pipeline that you're working in, the constraints that you're working under. How many polygons can I use? Okay, but our primary goal is to create that particular asset. So in this case, it's to make a gun that looks like a gun that we can integrate into our game and use it in our game. Okay, and then those topology concerns about number of polygons and so forth, and how those polygons flow, those are secondary. Okay, we want to make sure that it conforms to the shape, and then we want to make sure it's under budget. Obviously, if it's over budget, it doesn't matter if it conforms to the shape because we won't be able to use it. All right, so those are just things to think about. And I know that I've seen students who will create long expanses of geometry like this, but they'll use a lot of divisions inside there. And so that's just something to be aware of. If it's going to be if it's not changing direction, it's not going to be deforming. You're just creating these straight shapes. You don't need all of that resolution in there. So just think a little bit about how the geometry that you're creating is helping to create that silhouette and that shape that you're trying to get, and just doing it in the most optimal way possible. Okay, so that's just a little bit on kind of being efficient and thinking about the shape that you are creating. In the next lesson, let's talk about methods of, if we're working with quads, methods of kind of moving around or getting rid of triangles and n-gons. So we'll go ahead and talk about that in the next lesson.